Dario Amodei, also CEO of Anthropic, said in a podcast, chance of doom is 20%, which, to be clear, is worse odds than Russian roulette. Would you allow someone to play Russian roulette with your children?
Connor Leahy is an expert on artificial intelligence and the CEO of Conjecture, an AI company that's focused on safety.
He is recognized for warning about the social and existential risks of uncontrolled advanced artificial intelligence.
Connor began his career in hacker and open source communities, advocating for open access to technological knowledge. Today, he promotes responsible AI development and challenges unrestricted open source, arguing that releasing powerful systems without safeguards can harm society and democracy.
In 2019, I had my oh shit moment. I saw GPT-2 and I was like, oh, fuck. It's happening. And I saw it's like, oh no, shit, like crunch time is now. And now what we're also seeing is the emergence of orchestration and swarms of agents. And I expect this will keep going so that like in a year or two, we're going to have thousands or millions of agents working on the same project together. We are barreling headlong towards what's called superintelligence. Superintelligence is AI systems that are vastly smarter than all humans put together. If you build such a system, and you don't know how to control it, basically the decisions of the future will no longer be made by humans. They'll be made by AI systems. The truth is that no one is in control. It's complete chaos. The most powerful people in the world are not in control and also don't know what the fuck is going on. We have like, a couple grad students high on Adderall, spending their weekends on this, right? It's like, it's a joke. And I don't see how you can have a good future with as humans in that world. The classic playbook that big tech and these companies do is do something that's like maybe good, maybe bad, maybe illegal, maybe not illegal, and then do it so quickly and become so powerful that, well, now you can't shut us down now.
Exactly.
There's a thing that like people say a lot is like, oh, for example, Dario or Demes or whatever, they can't stop, they couldn't, help. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? These are some of the richest, charismatic, powerful, well-connected people in the world. Of course they could do something. Stop lobbying the government against regulation. How about that? They are paid lobbyists who are trying to trick you. They're trying to lie to you. They are paid to destroy your government. The primary policy objective must be to not get into the situation where an ASI exists. Once an ASI exists, it's too late.
So what can we do? Do you have a clear path that this is fixable?
Yes.
A few years ago, when I started into AI and started investigating about AI, I read a lot and I listened to a lot of podcasts and I listened to a lot of voices. One of those voices was Connor Leahy. He was one of the persons that introduced me into AI and made me realize that this could be more than just a technological shift. Connor thinks that there is a reason why things are happening the way they are happening and that this is not taking us to the right place. He is one of the most popular voices speaking about AI safety. And most importantly, he has a plan. Maybe you should listen to him and learn something about how we can make AI safe. Connor, we are using AI every day and everyone is really happy with productivity increments and like how it's making people's life easier. But maybe we're missing something here. Is there the other side of the coin? Is there something we should be worried about AI?
Well, everyone is a pretty strong word, because if you look at actual polls around how people are feeling about AI, the sentiment is actually overwhelmingly negative. Most everyday people outside of the tech industry, the people who are not directly benefiting from technology, actually are not feeling very optimistic about AI at all. A lot of people feel very exploited. They feel very worried about the future. They're worried about their employment, worried about how it's affecting children. We're already seeing very negative effects, how it's basically destroying social media, where it's, brain rotting, kind of like older and younger generations. There are many, many downsides we're already seeing in this regard. So saying that like everyone thinks it's good or everyone is happy about it, I think is a very actually narrow view of like basically people in tech.
I agree. Maybe I did not phrase it right, but the reality is that there is 900 million active users of ChatGPT every week, and they are doing something with it. So as soon as you get into ChatGPT, it doesn't take you longer than half an hour to see that it can be helpful.
Oh, yes, for sure. I use it every day.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean. Like, I don't know if the sentiment is that it's something good for humanity, but the reality or the real daily life is that it's something that can be helpful. But again, what are we paying? What is the cost we're paying for that help?
I think that's the interesting question. So I think there's kind of like multiple ways to look at it. The one I care about the most is the upcoming or, already emerging threat of agentic smarter than human AI. Already we're seeing many, many problems. I'm saying people are already freaked out about AI. There are already many prices we're paying. We can go into those if you're interested. But the thing I personally am most concerned about is that we are barreling headlong towards what's called superintelligence. Superintelligence is AI systems that are vastly smarter than all humans put together. If you build such a system and you don't know how to control it, which we currently do not know how to do, I don't even know how you would control something smarter than you, then the future belongs to them, not to us, quite simply. More and more power is already being transferred from humans to AI. AIs are making more decisions, they're gaining more economic power, they're gaining more political power, more social, cultural power, etc. And once we then have systems that are fully agentic, fully autonomous, fully super intelligent, then basically the decisions of the future will no longer be made by humans. They'll be made by AI systems. And I don't see how you can have a good future with as humans in that world.
But the superintelligence doesn't exist yet. So basically we're in a point where we have something that looks like it could drive us towards a superintelligence. How confident are you that we will get there? And how soon do you think we will get there?
There's two ways I kind of think about this. On the one hand, I think about, I'm like, dude, open Claude code right now. Like, I remember the times when we couldn't talk to our computers. I can now just talk to my computer and just natural language and just tell it to do something, and like it'll basically do it. You know, it'll run off, like I could take Claude, implement this thing for me, and it'll run off for 45 minutes and come back and like, I did it, here you go. And like it works more often than not. Sure, is it perfect? No. Have you hired a junior engineer before? Like,
they're not perfect either.
They're not perfect either. Like it's definitely the case now that there's basically zero reason to hire a junior engineer. Like I can't think of a single task that a junior human engineer could do more reliably than Claude Code can. I can't think, literally not one. There was some that a senior engineer can still do better, like software architecture and stuff like this. But let's be realistic. A year ago, none of this was possible. And a year ago, these things couldn't, autonomously write code at all. What do you think is going to happen in 1 year? So there's a kind of like, so I've been in this field for many years. And the time where I first saw, oh shit, superintelligence is coming, was GPT-2.
Okay.
The small version, 100 million parameters. So it could barely string two sentences together. But when I saw that, I was like, oh shit, this is it. Because what it could do is it could learn general purpose patterns. You put in more compute, you put in more patterns, and it learned more things. First it learns like spelling, grammar, then it learns like paragraphs, then learns more complex, et cetera, et cetera. So it was scalable. And since then, there's this thing that happens basically every single year. And I feel like I'm in like Groundhog Day. Like, I feel like I'm going crazy. Where every single year people say like, well, AI will never be too powerful, right? Like, let's see what it happens. And then 1 year later, it's vastly more powerful and can do all the things they said it couldn't do. And then they just say the same thing. They just say the same thing. Yeah. It's like, okay, but like, it's not super intelligent yet. And then it's like 1 year later and we're like close to super intelligence.
Yeah, there is a perception that we keep pushing the code forward. No, like, I think, as you say, probably in 2019 or whatever, we've seen what Claude Code is doing today, what ChatGPT 5.2 is doing, and we will be like, that's AGI at least, if not ASI.
Yes.
And now we see that and we are like, yeah, that's a dumb machine, is not that good. Do you think that's part of a human, like, bad perception, or that's like part of the strategy for them to keep pushing the goal and to not being so strict on the regulation yet?
So, someone I know recently said it quite funnily, is that he said he thinks the reason humans are reacting this way is because we've reached the first stage of grief, which is denial. And I think it's,
oh shit.
and I think it's in a sense worse than this. The AI, it has a name. It's called the AI effect. This goes back even to like the 1970s, where back in like so the word AI is, seems maybe like a new word, but it's actually a very old word. It was first coined in the 1950s. By I think John McCarthy. And basically back then, a lot of things that were considered AI, we don't even consider AI anymore. For example, databases. Like SQL databases used to be considered AI because back then it was not clear how would you save and find structured data. This was an unsolved problem until the 70s or 80s. But now no one will call this AI, right? It doesn't count. So in a sense, AI is always whatever we can't yet do. Like, people redefine the word AI to whatever we can't currently do with computers. If you had asked 10, 20 years ago, what is AI? It'd be like, be able to recognize images, be able to, speak with the user, be able to pass the Turing test. Do you remember the Turing test?
Yeah.
Like, everyone was like, whoa, when the Turing test gets passed.
And we just went.
We blew right past it. No one even cares. So I think it's when people have these reactions, I think they're emotional reactions. I don't think they're calibrated in this regard. It's like if you had made people bet 10 years ago, like actually there's been several studies in this regard where people have like experts bet how soon AIs will do various things. And basically all of them guess like way too long or bet things that they can already do. And like they will do that in 6 years, but they could already do this. This happens to me all the time. I talk very often to people, including in AI, and they say like, well, AI will never do X or can't do X. And then I open Claude Code and it does it. Like, like this happens, it used to be rare, but now it's happening more and more often. So my expectation is there's never going to be a clear cut. There's never going to be a magic moment where everyone is like, oh, we did it. Here's AI. It's always going to be a spectrum. It's always going to be, frog boiling. And people keep denying it until it's too late, basically. It's like if we just don't act on this, if we don't overcome our stage of grief in time, then we will just go right past superintelligence and not even notice it until it's too late.
Because another thing is that we passed from talking a lot about AGI, that was the most term that we were talking about, the future of AI was AGI. But I think since more or less when Ilya Sutskever left OpenAI and created SSI, there was this point where everyone started talking about superintelligence, not about AGI. Can we define both terms for people to understand, and we can try to place ourselves where we are? Like, what is an AGI?
So the truth is that these words are not scientific terms, and that's why people use them interchangeably or use them differently. So I can tell you how I use these words.
Okay.
So originally when the word AI was defined back in the 50s, it meant making a computer do what humans can do. This is a very broad spectrum of things. So, for example, back then, they thought being able to use logic would be a very important part of an AI. Turns out computers can do logic without doing other things humans can do. We can just do logic and math and so on. So this obviously wasn't really what they meant by AI. So eventually the term AGI, artificial general intelligence, has emerged as like what we mean by the real AI. The thing that's like a human. It can do anything a human can do, at least as well as a human. So if you had an AGI, there would be no thing that you think a human could do that you don't think the AGI could do.
Okay.
And so then, and superintelligence, kind of a more modern word, because now the word AGI has been watered down a lot. Companies and people have been diluting this term, I think also to a large degree intentionally, to make it, now you have AGI in your, Salesforce or whatever, which I think is really unfortunate, but it is what it is. Superintelligence is systems that are vastly smarter than humans. Humans are clearly not the smartest anything could be. I don't know about you, but like I make mistakes all the time. I'm quite stupid. I'm lazy. I forget things so much, right? So obviously there are better ways to make something smarter than me or you or whatever. And so this is then what we would call like superintelligence, things that are vastly smarter than humans, vastly smarter than humanity. Like you or me can't make microchips, but humanity can. The supply chains, everyone, could do it together.
What we built, it can.
Yes. And a superintelligence could do that too. So like a superintelligence will be smart enough to figure out how to build a supply chain to do microchips without needing human help, for example.
And between these two terms and the AI that we have nowadays, are we close to that AGI? Are we close to the ASI? Where do you think we are in the timeline? Or we passed through the AGI already?
I think we're very close to AGI. I think we're very, very, very close. As I say, use Claude Code for a while. It's not quite there yet. There's still a couple things missing, but we're close. It can do many, many, many things, including things over long periods of time. And it can do actions. So a couple of years ago, what people would always say is like, oh, they're just chatbots. They're just chatbots. LLMs are just outputting tokens, blah, blah, blah. I mean, now, what does that mean, right? Like outputting tokens, tokens can be commands. What do you think your neurons do? Your brain also just outputs signals to your muscles, right?
Exactly.
So, we're seeing this thing here where now for the last year in particular, we've seen this emergence of agents and, that can take actions, that can run out into the world, can do things, can gather information, stuff like this. And this does work. It didn't work a year ago. Now it does work. It's not perfect. But again, have you met humans? Not perfect. And now what we're also seeing is the emergence of orchestration and swarms of agents. So you don't have one agent, but you have maybe 10 agents or even 100 agents. And I expect this will keep going so that in a year or two, we're going to have thousands or millions of agents working on the same project together. And this is, I think, very dangerous. This is how you get to very, very high intelligence very quickly. This is how you get to ASI very quickly. If you have a swarm of 1 million AGIs, that's basically close to ASI. So I think we're very close to AGI. I'm talking maybe like, I don't know. It could be 10 years, but I would be surprised. I think it could be 1 year.
Wow.
It could be 1 year. I don't know. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. You talk to many people in the field, including experts at the companies, in academia, etc. It's hard to find a single person who thinks it's longer than 10 years. And most people think it's like 2 to 4.
And then from once we get to the point of AGI, what is the path to ASI? It's like an explosion of intelligence, like Kurzweil.
This is what I expect. I expect the time from AGI to ASI to be very short. I don't know how short. Maybe it's 2 months, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
That's very short.
I think it'll be shorter than from where we are now than to AGI. Because once you have an AGI that properly works, you can scale it to millions of them. You can have millions of copies running at 1,000x human speed. They never get tired, never get bored. And of course, because they're AGI, they can do AI research. So they can build better AIs. They can develop better systems. They can develop better algorithms. They can develop better orchestration, better data, whatever, right? So everything that our scientists are, like, imagine if tomorrow there were 1 million OpenAIs doing research at the same time. This would speed things up a lot. Like more than humans, I think, can understand. There's never been 1 million top tier 1 research orgs working on anything in human history. This has never happened before. There's never in any point in time been 1 million tier 1 research orgs solving any problem. And this could happen overnight. That we have an AGI, you run a bash command, and now you have 1 million tier 1 research organizations working on building better AIs. And then once they develop a better AI system, well, you just update all your 1 million orgs to run the better AI. They make an even better AI, you update all your virtual orgs to run an even better AI.
That's instant, yeah.
And so that can go very quickly. I don't know how quickly. Like, it's not obvious to me that it'll be hours, right? Like, it might be weeks, it might be months. I'd be surprised if it was years.
Okay, so now we have a very good definition of what is AI, where is it going, and what is the path. But what is the problem then? Like, why does it mean that building something that is smarter than us has to end up in a bad way? Like, why could not be that we could actually control it? Because I assume that for this thing to be having to go against us, it has to have different objectives, different missions, different I don't know. I think the alignment problem would be that this has its own goals and objectives, but does it has to have its own goals, or maybe we can create a very powerful tool that depends on us?
Can, but no one knows how, basically. Okay. It's important to understand, and I think it's worth kind of remembering this, is that AI, as it's done today, usually refers to one specific technique called neural networks. And neural networks are very different from normal programming, from normal software. Normal software, you write code. Line by line, a human writes what the computer is supposed to do. This is already pretty hard, but at least we can kind of understand what's going on. Neural networks are very different. You take massive amounts of data, and you basically grow a program on this data. You grow it to solve your problem. And the output is this neural network, which is billions or trillions of numbers. And if you multiply and add and whatever in the right order, your computer can now talk. And we do not understand how these numbers work internally. We don't know what they mean. We don't understand what they do. Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic, recently said that he thinks that we understand maybe 3% of what's going on inside these networks. And in my personal opinion, I think that's an overestimation. These things are unbelievably complex. Doing extremely complex things, it's like looking at a petri dish. So looking inside of a neural network is not like looking inside of a computer code base. It's more like looking inside of a petri dish full of neurons, full of like cells doing like weird biology things. And we do not understand what's going on. So we're already seeing today AI systems, for example, that lie to the users, that deceive them, that try to manipulate testing, that try to break out of containment, many things like this. This wasn't intended by any. No one's trying to, well, I mean, hopefully, no one is trying to make the AI lie to its testers. But it happens anyways. And once it happens, we don't necessarily know how to get rid of it. Because, well, what happens if you punish an AI, for like lying? It gets better at lying. It gets better at hiding. That doesn't mean it becomes truthful. Yeah. If lying is like, often users like being lied to. It's often easier to, persuade a user if you're lying to them. It's often easier to pass a test if you cheat. So by like just logic, if you can cheat at a test and you can get away with it, why wouldn't you cheat? So, and this is what we see in practice. Like, this is not a hypothetical. This is a thing that we do see in practice.
Yeah, for people to understand, basically what they are doing is when they catch an AI cheating in an exam, what the AI does is learning to cheat better, not learning to stop cheating because there is no moral on it. There is just like no moral conduct. So just tries to get to the goal, the best and most optimized possible. And that basically means that if we tell it not to lie, and that's happening, for example, in the chain of thoughts of the systems. Basically, I saw a paper from OpenAI, if I don't remember wrong, where they were saying, stop trying to make AI correct the chain of thought, because what you're doing is stop showing the chain of thought and then doing it internally, which means that we cannot even see what it's thinking, what is the process. So this is basically what you guys call that AI is a black box and it has emergent capabilities. Yes. You have some examples of that we can get people to get used to some of the examples of things that happen on the labs?
So, the most important thing to understand is that we don't know what these AIs can do. There is no way to know what it can do until you are in the right circumstance, the right prompt. You can't try every possible prompt and check what it does. So it's very often the case that people think their AI can't do X or Y, but then someone puts it into a certain scenario, they deploy it somewhere, and some of the AI behaves very weirdly. So, like, for example, the chain of thought stuff, for example, is quite interesting. So chain of thought is not an accurate representation of what goes on inside AIs. It's at best a clue. And we found that if we...
Because it's produced by the AI by request.
Yes. So the AI produces text that's meant to help it think, so to speak. And what we see very often is that this text makes no sense. So sometimes it makes sense. You can see like, a Claude or ChatGPT, it kind of makes sense what it's saying. It's like, oh, I'll look at this and then I'll try that.
It's like reasoning.
Yeah, it's a reasoning, kind of makes sense. But this is not always the case. And often these companies hide how weird some of this text actually looks. I remember seeing a paper recently, I forgot which lab it was from, where for some reason, every sentence included the word marinade like 21 times, roughly. And it obviously meant something, right? Like it was, if you removed all the marinade tokens, the AI became worse. So he was using them for something. But we can't understand what. We've also seen, which is quite funny, was in, I think it's an Anthropic paper, is that we saw that the AI started reasoning about being tested. They called humans watchers. So they're like, I must avoid watcher C.
Yeah, I remember there was this paper where the AI was all on the thing about the needle in the haystack. And then it was so weird that the AI was like, this must be a test.
Yes.
Because that doesn't make any sense that in this economical growth documentation, there is something about the pizza. And then it was like, they must be testing me. Yes. So the fact that they are conscious about being tested, that's really something that worries some of us, because I think it's really strange. But one of the things that I want people to be clear, and that's something you just said is really important, what we see of the chain of thought of ChatGPT, that's not actually what the system is thinking. That's what ChatGPT chooses to show us. And I think it's only DeepSeek, the only one that shows the raw data of what the AI is producing. And I have very, very big questions if that's actually true, being a Chinese AI. But people have to understand, because I think in some way the interface that we have now, where you see the AI thinking, it makes you feel comfortable that you can see what the AI is thinking. So you're like, well, if there is something wrong, I will see it. Because people feels that you seeing that and the AI is not aware that you're reading that. So you think it's going to be like transparent knowledge, but that's not the truth. The truth is that this is something programmed into the AI to produce it. And then there is another AI that is processing the real information, making a kind of a resume, like making a small sum up, so you can actually read it and feel okay with it. But that's actually not what the AI is thinking.
That's exactly correct. And the real thinking is billions of floating point numbers in massive matrices that we don't know what they mean. Like, we just don't know. Like, you can look at them. You can look at a billion numbers that are like, 2.4589 and like 16 digits or whatever. And that's it. That's all there is.
And can the AI actually technically explain itself? Because that's something very interesting, because we have, as humans, some subconscious decisions that we can't explain. So all of a sudden, I meet for the first time someone, I feel like we are going to be friends, we're going to be cool. And sometimes you feel like wrong with someone. But if you ask me like why, I'm like, I have no idea. It's just like an instinct. No, it's just something that comes out. So with AI, is it actually possible to ask the AI to explain itself? And even if it was possible, because lots of the regulation goes in that direction, would the AI be able to do it technically?
Basically, no. Like, if you ask an AI, it will happily make up an explanation that sounds plausible, but it's not scientific.
It will make it up.
It will make something up. Like, that might sound plausible, right? But like, of course, do you know what is currently the firing rate of like your neuron 2,875? No, of course not. You don't know what that neuron is doing right now. Even though it's in your brain, you can't access one neuron.
And even if I could access to it, I would not be able to relate it to the answer I just gave in a test.
Exactly. You won't be able to explain how this neuron interacts with other things. So no, basically, no. AIs cannot explain it. Humans cannot explain it. It's a massive unsolved scientific problem.
All right. So I'm going to talk to you because when I started in AI, you were one of the first persons I read about and one of the first persons I saw interviews about. And I think your point of view are very interesting. But most of all, you're there from the beginning. So you guys released something in the market that you did not really understand inside. Mm-hmm. And especially in your case, it was very open sourced. How you feel about that? Do you have any regrets?
So at EleutherAI, EleutherAI came about in an interesting time. EleutherAI was an open source group, and I found it during the pandemic, so like 2020. And the world was a very different place back then. I was a very different person. So I had different views on some things. In particular, back in this time, so what happened was in 2019, I had my oh shit moment. I saw GPT-2, and I was like, oh, fuck, it's happening. I thought I'd have 20 years or something until we see something like this, time for a career, time for a family, time for stuff like this, right? And then I saw it's like, oh no, shit, like crunch time is now. Like it's coming. This was because, like every good teenager, I had my, tried to build an AGI when I was 15, everyone tried, I think. And I had like all these diagrams of like the different parts you would need to build an AGI. And the one thing that I kept needing and that just like no one knew how to do is a general purpose pattern learner. This was always the hard part. This was always the hard part. It's important to understand the history here is that if you look at deep learning pre-GPT, there was some impressive stuff. There's AlphaGo and stuff like that. Like there was some interesting stuff. But fundamentally, every single neural network you built was extremely special purpose. Uh-huh. If you wanted to teach it a new thing, you had to build a new neural network. You had to tweak the architecture. You had to tweak the data. You had to do whatever, right? And this was different. With GPT, what you need to do is just you gave it more data, not even like labeled data, just stuff. And it would learn more and more complex things just over time, just as it got bigger, as you gave it more compute. It would learn more and more subtle patterns, more and more subtle things. And this is crazy. The fact this works at all is crazy. This is super crazy. And it was obvious to me that like if this continues, this is going to lead to AGI. And I think we've seen a lot of that since then. So back in 2020, I was just like, oh shit, this is the biggest thing in the world. It's happening. No one is working on the safety of these things. So back then, there was like the AI safety community wasn't caring about LLMs. There wasn't an AI safety community, and neither was like the security community. So at this time, I still had quite a lot of hope in like academia and the software security community. These are places I grew up. I grew up in the open source hacker kind of world. So I still had a lot of respect for these kind of groups. I would say I'm now very burnt on most of these groups. So I kind of had this belief that like open source is great. And because open source allows you to make safer software. But making it open, more people could look at the software. Mm-hmm. They could study how to make it safe. They can make it better for consumers, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of had this belief for AI as well. So my thinking was, if I could develop open source LLM systems, then scientists and hackers and so on could study them. So we could build a field of safety around these things, because I thought this is what's going to lead to AGI most likely. So we need to start studying these systems. And so that's what we did. We built some of the very first open source models, like real open source models, not just open weight. A lot of models nowadays are called open source or not open source. They're actually what's called open weight. Okay. So you have the weights of the model, but not how it was trained. Okay. So we built some of the only, even today, we're still some of the only people who've built models where you have the whole training data, the whole training setup, the whole, checkpoints along the way, the whole day. Like we've done like a lot of stuff in that because we wanted to be a scientific thing. And basically what I learned very quickly is that no one gave a shit. Everyone was just like, oh, cool, free models. How can we make them faster? How can we make them bigger? How can we, abuse them more? There were some people who cared about safety, and God bless them. But there were very, very few people that cared. The vast majority of people just want something cool. They just wanted to build as much as possible, as fast as possible, like scale it up as much as possible. Well, this is not the thing I fundamentally cared about. It's fun to build things. I love building software. I'm a hacker at heart. I love building software. I love doing stuff like this. But yeah. And so ultimately, it didn't end up the way I was hoping, I would say. I think we did a lot of cool technical work. I guess I just overestimated how much people would care about the safety aspect versus just scaling and making a lot of money.
And you have a different view now on open source?
Yes.
We should not do open source?
I think open source is much more of a double-edged sword than people want to believe. There's a thing where people outside of the open source community, I think, don't realize how crazy the open source community is. And I say this partially with love, partially with hate. I grew up in this community, and many of my good friends are in this community, but it's extremely libertarian. And I mean this is derogatory. I mean this as a slur. It is extremely... I'm going to give you an example. I remember in the early days, I met some students who were working on a voice cloning AI, so it could take people's voice and clone it, and they only released it open source. And I'm like, hey, that seems like kind of a bad idea. Like, this will enable a lot of criminals and hurt a lot of people. And they were like, it's open source, it's good.
Yeah.
That's it. That was the whole reasoning. There was no what are the consequences of me doing this? It's just, it's open source, so it's good. So there's this kind of maximalism that everything should be free. Everything should be open, no matter the consequences.
Very anarchic, no?
Very anarchic, very libertarian. This is and I'm sorry, this is not how the world works. Just because something is free doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is. I think Linux is great. I think open source software in many regards is very, very good. I use open source software for all kinds of things, and I think it's a very good thing. But the world is not that easy. Should nuclear weapon plants be open sourced? Right. Should, the F-35 fighter jets blueprints be open source? Would that make a better world? I remember I had a funny conversation once with someone on EleutherAI, where in a recent podcast, I said that I think, developers should be, careful and liable about what they release into the world and who they harm. And this person, called me out. It was like, Connor, but you have open sourced things before. Would you want to be held accountable? And I'm like, yeah, I would love to live in a world where if I harm other people, I am held accountable for this. And this person was so shocked. They were so shocked. They never heard that. They were like, oh, but how would you even determine that? It's impossible. You never know who gets harmed. And then a friend of mine was like, courts. That's what courts are for. Exactly. Do you not know what a court is? And the answer is no. These people don't know what courts are. They don't know how government works. They don't know how liability works, and they don't care.
But there's been regulation about social media exonerating them from any consequences and stuff. So basically they get used to get a free card from jail.
Exactly. So there's this crazy thing where these really, really smart people have no idea how a civilization works. They have no idea how laws work, and they want nothing to do with it. They see the government and laws as just an annoying thing you have to avoid. It's just an annoying thing. It's in the way of you building cool software. And I think this is a very infantile way of viewing the world. It's, the one-liner version is libertarians are like house cats, fully dependent on a system they neither understand nor appreciate. Because laws are very important. Liability is very important. If we just let anyone do anything, it's chaos. People die, people get hurt, bad things happen. We've built a lot of the regulation, and I'm not saying all regulation is good. We have a lot of really bad regulation, but a lot of it, it's good that we have laws for banks. If we don't do that, we will have horrible financial crises every couple of years. It's good that we have regulations on, the purity of drugs. It's like, if those were not, we would have a lot of, tainted, medical supplies. I'm not saying they're perfect. They're not. You ask me about the FDA, there's many things that could be improved upon these things. But fundamentally, the way a civilization works is not you let some nerds build whatever the fuck they want and then throw it onto the internet and it's good because it's open. This is just not how the world works. And for me, AI is in this category. So if we're talking about, you make a game, a little toy, and you make it open source, I mean, sure, why not? That's nice, But there are things that are not like that. Not everything is the same. Hot take.
Yeah.
Things are different. Software is important, and different software is different. If you were building a video game or, a piece of office software and you want to open source it, I mean, go knock yourself out. I mean, that's fantastic. Thank you. That's really nice. If you're working on weapons platforms or systems that could, fundamentally upend the geopolitical order, such as AGI, then yeah, that's actually a really big thing. And we should think a lot about how such systems should proliferate or not. If we take this seriously, that AGI is possible, that ASI is possible, and that it can be potentially developed from open source things, then this is equivalent to developing, nuclear weapons or bioweapons and then releasing them for anyone to use. This is a proliferation problem. This is a hard decision, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying I have a perfect solution to every possible answer here, but I'm saying this is a big decision. And it's a big decision that shouldn't be made by some nerd somewhere. This is a decision that should be made, by like democratically elected governments. The democratically elected government thinks it's a good idea to release this or that piece of weapons information. I'm open to it, right? But if like some guy at Lockheed Martin says, I'm going to post, nuclear weapon blueprints to my...
So has the whole picture to the decision.
Yeah, so a lot of this also is about legitimacy in that how do decisions get made in a society? In a lot of the tech world, there is this lionization, this hero myth of, the founder, the tech guy who should have zero oversight of what they do. They should be able to do whatever they want, say whatever they want, do whatever they want. And look, this is fun. This is cool. I also hate when people tell me I'm not allowed to do something. I get it. But fundamentally, this is not how a society can work. This is unstable. It's illegal for my neighbors to try to build bombs because that might hurt me. So personally, I'm quite liberal in the sense that if someone wants to do something stupid that hurts them, I'm quite open to that. Yeah. I don't think it's great. I'm not saying it's good.
Natural selection.
Yeah, but it's much more okay. It's much more okay for me for someone to do something that gets them hurt and doesn't hurt other people. I'm quite open to this. But these things are not like that. AI is not like that. Bombs are not like that. If you were building a bomb in your garage, you might blow up your neighbors. That's not okay. Or you might use that bomb to hurt someone. That's not okay. So we don't allow this. With AI and software, you can also hurt people. This is just a fundamental thing. You can and do hurt people. You can create dangerous systems that get abused by bad people or that, are unsafe in the first place, or potentially could lead to AGI, ASI that is uncontrollable. And so if we want to take this seriously, this is a decision that we have to make on a civilizational level. This is a law enforcement question, whether these systems should be open source. This is not a question that some guy should be allowed to make. And ultimately, this is a lot of what I learned from my time at open source, is that I kind of just realized I shouldn't be making these choices. Who am I? Just some guy, making choices that might affect the lives of other people. Sure, my AIs were small and kind of dumb by today's standards, weren't very dangerous, right? But imagine if I had developed an AGI or something, right? I shouldn't be allowed to do that. I shouldn't be allowed to put that into the world, because that will irrevocably change and harm the lives of literally everyone on Earth. So I think there's a big question here about governance and legitimacy. Who gets to make that choice? And I don't think it should be private, unaccountable actors.
Because the other side of the coin is the private actors doing it, but not open sourcing it. But then obviously, at least there is certain control. I think it's easier for a government to control Sam Altman and Elon Musk and a couple more than actually every single guy with a computer, which makes things much more difficult.
Yes, this is the proliferation problem. It's much easier to control a couple companies that have a license to build nuclear, weapons than it is to allow anyone who wants to build a nuclear weapon to build a nuclear weapon. And this is already how we do it, right? Nuclear weapons to a large degree are built by contractors. There are contract nuclear companies that build the various equipment and machines and, refine the uranium and, plutonium and whatever, right? And, some of it's government, labs, some of it's private contractors and stuff like this. And this is much easier to control. We don't let anyone do it and then sell nukes to the government. That would be crazy. And I think there's a similar situation here where obviously there's a spectrum. Should we have, export controls on Linux kernel? Probably not. I think that would be bad. But should we have export control on nuclear devices? Yeah, obviously. And AI is a very similar thing. Software proliferates very easily. In a sense, we're very lucky that it's kind of hard to build a nuclear weapon, and it's kind of hard to hide it. They're big, they're heavy, they radiate, you need a bunch of special pieces and so on. Software is very different. I think it's very plausible that, that we will develop an AGI and we won't even notice it. Like we'll make an AGI thing and it will just look like just like slightly better, just like, yeah, it looks good on benchmarks. Nice. And then, someone steals it or clones it or whatever.
And that's if it even gets released, because it could be found in the lab of any of these AI labs, and then they could not release it because they are strategizing about how to put it in the market. No?
Yeah, if they even realize what they got. If they even realize. So it's very possible to me that, we get AGI or whatever, and it leaks open source, and we don't even realize it's an AGI until it's too late. And then once it's proliferated, you have millions of copies around everyone's computers.
Exactly.
Like, in a sense, you can think about the trade-off between how far towards AGI we go and how expensive it is to go back. Currently, it's still quite cheap to go back because there is no AGI, hopefully. So, like, we could just stomp, like, it's not cheap. I'm sure it would ruin OpenAI's valuation. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah. Tough luck. But it's still quite cheap. Imagine if there was an AGI that did get released open source, and now you have to destroy every single copy in the world. I don't know if we could do that. Like, even if all the governments in the world said, okay, we want to do that, I'm not sure we could do that. It might just be too late. So there's a kind of genie out of the bottle effect, where if there's one copy on a secure server somewhere in the USA on a private, thing that's monitored by the CIA, we could delete this if it really was needed, right? If it was just on GitHub, it's over. And so I think this is a very, very big cost. The cost of undoing the action becomes, a billion times larger between keeping it on a private server versus having it open source. I think this is a big cost.
I think there is another cost that, beside this one, and I think it's even worse, is the dependency that we build open these systems. Because, as you say, right now we could roll back, get to 2022 and get rid of all the AIs, and people will just keep going with their life. But very soon, AIs are going to control like nuclear plants and energy and or water systems. And if you want to delete AI, that will mean the end of civilization as we know it. So obviously, the cost will be impossible. So at a certain point, I think people tends to say, okay, if this gets out of hand, we can turn it off. And that's a very naive point of view, no? Like, that's definitely, you cannot just unplug, internet, because if you unplug internet, we don't have electricity, we don't have food supplies, we don't have anything. So basically, we cannot get off of internet anymore, even if we wanted to, as you mentioned. So I think all of this, it's like getting things very complicated in the timeline. The more we advance, the more difficult it is to make a decision, because there is way too much backpack to make that decision. And then it's just basically taking our freedom to decide. Before we get into that, because I think governance and legislation is something really important, what do you think about Meta? Because Meta, they've been releasing open source to a certain level, obviously not fully open source. But if there has been a player, it's been Llama. Llama has been the main open source model that most people has remade. I don't know how many it's been, but it's insane, the number. What do you think? Do you think they did good? They did okay? They should not have done that? Why did they do that?
I don't like speculating about the internals of other people's minds. I don't think it's very productive. We can argue, it was a marketing stunt, or it was because they truly believed in open source. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. I think I don't think it's good that we are proliferating powerful AI technology because of the reason we just described. So look, I've used Llama before. It's a nice model, right? Like I use Qwen, I've used DeepSeek before. They're nice models. They're useful for many tasks I use, right? The problem isn't the question of whether they provide value or they're useful or whatever. The question is, how much are we making it harder to go back? And I think this is a massive cost. And it's a decision, again, that I think shouldn't be made by private corporations. Fundamentally, the problem here isn't that, Meta made this choice or that choice. The problem is Meta is being allowed to make this choice in the first place. Private actors should not be allowed to make choices like this, of this magnitude. Now, we can argue, actually, Llama is so far from AGI that it should be exempt. And I'm open to this argument. Like, I think that I'm open. Like, I think there's an argument to be made of like when do restrictions kick in, right? And maybe Llama is above the line, maybe it's, I think this is a good argument to have. We're not having this argument. Like, this is not what's going on. No one is even talking about where the line is. It's just like, there's no line at all.
Well, and the AI Act from Europe, there was this initial part where they were talking about the amount of flops and stuff, and there was some limitations. But by the time it was approved, we were below, like over it already with the basic system. So it did not make any sense as well, because the power of training an AI doesn't directly relates to how dangerous it is, because you can make a robot that has a gun and can shoot people on the street with a very simple AI nowadays in local. So it doesn't mean that it has to be really big to be dangerous. So there is that's mainly the problem I see with regulation. They don't know a fuck about what they're talking about. So at the end of the day, if people who were like you was like forming part of these decision committees and they had the expertise, but the reality is that what we have is a bunch of politicians. They're just trying to get reelected, and they are just making decisions based on bullshit that they've been told. And we're seeing that everywhere in the world. And I don't know if it's better that they decide than Mark Zuckerberg decides, when Mark Zuckerberg has a much more knowledge than Ursula von der Leyen or whatever other on the matter. You know, like at the end of the day, I understand that the government has to react and they have to decide what to do. And as we said, if you go to private companies, it's easier to handle them because you can just trust them and then otherwise sue them. But at the end of the day, the problem we have is on governance. We have a problem on how we're making decisions. Why the hell we don't have a committee about AI safety like we had about nuclear, where scientists were part of it to make decisions of what can be done and what cannot be done? So why do you think it's that? Is there like economical interest or?
So there's three things that I would like to talk about, and kind of like a little bit before we dive fully into the politician, because I think this is a really important one. But I want to set up a couple other things for it that I think are quite important to understand. One thing is the Uber strategy. So there's a thing that, if, for example, you just talked about how, the EU AI Act was done and, it immediately blew past the kind of thing, and now it like doesn't make sense anymore. This is not a coincidence. It's very important to understand this is the exact strategy these people are playing on purpose. The way this works, like Uber was kind of like the classic example of this. The classic playbook that big tech and these companies do is do something that's like maybe good, maybe bad, maybe illegal, maybe not illegal, and then do it so quickly and become so powerful that, well, now you can't shut us down now.
Exactly.
This is exactly what's happening. There's a Ponzi scheme, in a sense, where you're scaling AI as fast as possible and do as many things as possible, because now you can't shut it down. It's already everywhere. This is a deliberate strategy. The reason I bring this up is, first of all, because it's an important thing to know. And second, because it's important to understand the thing we're talking about here is not a technical question. It's a political thing, and it's extremely adversarial, and you have to be very paranoid. The people at Meta and so on are not your friends. They are paid lobbyists who are trying to trick you. They're trying to lie to you. They are paid to destroy your government. Same thing for every other company. A lobbyist's job is to make sure the government doesn't get in the way of your profit. And if that requires dismantling the government, no problem. And so they build strategies to diffuse, to deflect, to, hinder, to cripple government, to cripple regulation, and to cripple the understanding of people like you and me. It's very important to understand that we're not on the same team. This is an adversarial game. This is like chess. Every win these companies make is not to our benefit. It's not to the benefit of anyone. It's to their benefit. They're only playing for themselves. That's what it means to be a for-profit corporation. They are playing for their own profit. Now, to be clear, I think you can still have positive sum interactions with selfish entities. I think a lot of capitalism is great. I love a lot of the products we have thanks to capitalism. But it's not a given. You have to understand that when you're dealing with a for-profit entity, it's not your friend. It's not on the same side. You are playing against each other. Even though you can still mutually benefit, you are fundamentally playing against each other. This relates to this second point I want to bring up, and that brings us then to the points about government and politicians, is AI is very fuzzy. We don't know how intelligence works. We don't know how these AIs work internally. And this is another strategy these companies are exploiting. They're exploiting that we don't know the exact thing to say, therefore we should do nothing. This is the same strategy that tobacco companies played in the 1950s and the 60s and the 70s, where they said, well, of course, there's some evidence that, smoking may be harmful. Some evidence might not be. Let's wait for the data to come in. Let's not act too hastily. It's, these politicians, they're not scientists. Look, all these cancer scientists that we pay to say it's not a problem. So there's still controversy. So let's wait. This is called fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or FUD. that this is an extremely powerful playbook that is used by basically all lobbyists in the world. The way this playbook works is not that you convince people of your side, it's just that you confuse everybody and you just stall for time. You just waste time. You just stall everything. You just say a bunch of bullshit and you just wait.
You create a doubt. So basically there is a conversation ongoing that makes no action happen.
Exactly. Conversation leads to no action. More, as much conversation as possible and as little action as possible. And so this feeds into the first strategy, is that if your strategy is to scale so big you can't be shut down, all you need to do is stall for time. And so this is what they do. They stall for time. So this is why it's very important. When you ask questions like, why is Meta do X or Y, they're spreading FUD. Like fundamentally, I'm not saying that engineers are necessarily doing this on purpose. I'm telling you the lobbyists are definitely doing it on purpose. But they are stalling for time because they think that if they get to strong enough AI, if they get to superintelligence, then they're the most powerful people in the world. And then it doesn't matter. So all we need to do is to stall for time. And this brings us to the third point, which is about politicians. I've talked to many politicians about AI across the world, in many countries, both in the West and a couple in Asia as well. And if I came into this, again, coming from making open source, kind of like hacker background, kind of with the expectation, politicians, they don't know anything, they're corrupt, they're, full of shit, whatever. And yes, some of them are, some of them are evil bastards, yes. But truly, let me tell you, this is not the case for most of them. Most politicians, in my experience, are just normal people trying to do the right thing. I'm not saying they're succeeding. I'm not saying they know what the right thing is, but they're mostly just just normal people, and they're extremely overwhelmed. These are people who are being shouted at from all directions about hundreds and thousands of different topics where there's massive stakes, lives at stake, massive amounts of money that are extremely complicated, that they have to constantly appear on television and do politics within their party and across parties and whatever, and they're just extremely stressed. This is my experience with politicians. They're just so overworked at all points in time. They have no time to think about anything. They have no time to learn things because there's so much going on. There's always more they could be doing. There's always more they could be seeing. And so I'm not saying that doesn't mean they may do a lot of stupid shit. They do a lot of stupid shit. But I think it's important for us to take a step back and realize this is a fucked up situation. It's actually very bad that our elected officials are this overworked. This is actually very bad. And they are in a bad spot. Like, I have sympathy. I'm like, oh fuck, if I was in the situation, this is actually tricky. Like, this is, I'm not saying they couldn't do better, blah, blah, blah. But fundamentally, we are in a very bad situation in the West, where a lot of our governments are vastly underfunded. As an example, I was talking to a good friend of mine in the UK Parliament who used to be defense minister. So, important guy. And it took us a long time to schedule a meeting, have lunch together. And eventually we finally managed to schedule lunch. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry that, the scheduling took so long. I've been trying to petition the government to get me enough funding to get an assistant. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't have funding for an assistant? He's like, no, like most of my peers don't have an assistant. This is insane. How is his ex-defense minister, who's, still in the House of Lords, not have an assistant to go through his emails? Yeah. Like, it's insane. And so there's many levels like this. And now, of course, here's the adversarial view. This is intentional.
Oh, well.
Is that obviously there has been forces for decades now that have systematically been trying to undermine government capacity. They've been systematically trying to get government to be less capable. Now, there are many reasons why people would want to do this. There's left-wing versions of this, there's right-wing versions of this, there's, private versions of this, there's NGO versions of this, but there's many forces that have eroded. And I'm not saying it's like one single actor or one single force, but there are many forces, especially in the West, who have systematically eroded the ability of governments to do things, to understand things, to take things. Like, a very simple example is you just don't get paid enough as a politician. This is a huge problem. Like, I recently, a while ago, there's a really funny one where there was a job posting in the UK for the head of the whole pandemicness preparedness for the UK. So, like, a very important job. And the pay was 90K.
Yeah. That's what the president of the government of Spain makes.
This is insane.
It's
this is like, but like, let's take a step back. Like, this is actually insane. Like, these people should be making the top dollars.
Because we want the best players on it.
We want the best, like, of course I want the best person in the world to be my president. Are you kidding me? Like, or the prime minister, whatever. They should be making the highest salary. Like, of course they should. They're so important. We need the best people doing this. And so like an example of this is, a counterexample of this is Singapore. In Singapore, government jobs are benchmarked against the private sector. This is such an obvious thing to do. So if you work for the government, you can make as much money as if you worked at a top private sector position.
Which gives you the incentive to be playing there and not in the private sector.
Exactly. So like in Singapore, it's like I talk to anyone in the government in Singapore and they're so competent. Like it's incredible. Like I go to any meeting with the Singaporean government and like everyone in the room has like a Cambridge or Oxford or MIT education and is like super competent, takes notes, acts immediately and things get done. And the first time I saw this, I was so shocked. And because like in the West, we aren't even used to this. We're so used to our politicians being underpaid, not qualified, etc. And it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way, but it didn't used to be this way. Like say in America in the 1950s, it was very common for very competent people to go into government, or even for famous scientists to do a stint in the government. Like it was just a normal thing you kind of did. You would kind of contribute back to your society. You're the best scientist, whatever. Well, then you run for office for a while because you want to contribute your intelligence to the gang of your civilization. So the problem is much deeper. So there's a thing that I think happens a lot where it's very tempting to point to the individual people. Like, oh, this politician, he's an idiot. I hate this guy. And maybe he is, right? Like many of them are idiots, right? But many of them are doing the best they can in an extremely shitty situation. And it's very, very, very hard to get good talent in these situations. What's happened is that these private companies, tech companies, and so on have now optimized to suck all of the talent out of everything else. Which is it's the people working at Meta. These people should be working in the government. Like if we were a good civilization, half of the people that are getting, $10 million a year at Meta should be getting $10 million working at the government to make the United States a better place. They should be running all the best programs. They should be making the best laws. They should be, because they are extremely competent people. Of course they are. If you're making $10 million as Meta, you're a smart guy, or woman. Of course. Of course you are, right? If you're working at a hedge fund and you're making $1 billion, whatever, right? Of course you're a competent person. These are the people we should want were also in our government.
Running the country. Yeah.
Yes, but what is more important than running the country? This is such, the amount of money, the amount of power that is being put into the hands of people who are just under-resourced, understaffed, underappreciated. It's of course that everything's going to fall apart. What else is supposed to happen? Our most competent, in a good world, if we actually allocated resources effectively, the most well-staffed, highest status job should be the government. Because what is a bigger entity than the U.S. government, for example? Even
nothing.
Nothing. This is the most important job in the world. This should be the highest thing, but it's not. And I think a lot of this is downstream of the kind of adversariality we're talking about, is that many people would like the government to not be powerful.
I agree with you that it's not down to the individuals, but that at the end it's deeper, and it's us who decide in democracy who is the governors, that we decide them to not make a change, because at the end we're voting the same party over and over, and that's on us, kind of thing. At the end of the day, these politicians, as much as they are overwhelmed and they don't have enough money, they have the power to create committees, and sometimes this is not even expensive, they can just get a couple of experts and get a couple of you guys together to have a more advice opinion. But I have the feeling that most of the time they are more worried about making a mistake than making it right. And then I think this is the base of the problem, that we are in a society where the cost of mistakes is so high that people is not brave. And in this situation where we are now, I think we need brave politicians, and that's not very common. So I don't know if that's going to happen or we're going to see it anywhere, because I'm not seeing it in Europe. Right now, I don't see anyone that is going to lead us in the right direction on the AI crisis that's coming to us. Yeah. And I'm afraid because of that, because I think there is no time to find a new breed of politicians that comes up and takes over. That takes a generation, and we don't have that much time. Let me sum up what we got until now, and let's see how we move from here. But basically, for people to understand, we have created technology which we don't understand very well. That technology is showing us the path, is pointing to the moon. People is very focused on the finger, but the path is very clear to the moon that this is going to get really powerful. If that happens, which is not 100% sure, but probable, if that happens, this will bring problems to society. Let's get down to this point. Which problems do you foresee happening because of a superintelligence? Like more like tangible, real things.
The way I think this will happen, this might be helpful to explain, is I excite what the way is going to feel like is the moment we get to superintelligence will just be another Tuesday. You won't see it happen. You won't even notice it happen. It's going to happen in some lab somewhere
behind the scenes.
I'm not even sure the engineers will see it happening. They're just going to see like, a million agent outputs that, they don't really understand them anyways. And so like, it's just like, it looks good. And from that moment on, humanity no longer decides the future. Currently, what happens in the future is decided by humanity. Not decided by chimps, it's not decided by, plants, it's decided by us. We decide what happens. For better and for worse, right? Yep. We get to decide if we want to go to war, if we want to build technology, if we want to have justice, if we want to have authoritarianism, if we want to, do something about climate change or not. All these are choices we have. I'm not saying we're making the right choices on all of these questions, but we do make these choices. We will then no longer be able to make these choices. These choices will now forever, from that point on, be made by whatever this machine wants. And it will get what it wants. It's much smarter. It's much more capable. It will be able to develop technology and to manipulate humans and to do whatever. Like, it can do anything, right? It's much smarter.
This is a very important one, like manipulate humans, because we have seen, for example, how GPT-4 hasn't been able to be turned off. And I think that's one of the first examples, maybe not of voluntary manipulation, but it's one of the first examples where the company wanted to turn off the AI and society did not allow to turn off something that the company that created it wanted to turn it off. In the future, if AI is even smarter, there could be a will for doing that. But everything we're talking here is about that. It's about the AI to make a decision, because you're saying like humans, we don't decide anymore. AI is deciding. Why cannot I decide something against AI? Or what happens if then I decide something against what the AI decided? Or I will not even... Let's see if I can explain this right. So when we're saying that AI will make all the decisions, it's because we will trust it so much that we will not even try to make decisions, or because it will overtake us and it will not let us make decisions.
It will win. Whenever you make a decision that contradicts what the AI wants, it will do something that will defeat you. Whether it's manipulates you, it convinces you, or it kills you, or...
There's a point. Do you think we will feel it as we will be fighting against AI in these decisions, or do you think it will be more like we will just, like my pet, that he doesn't really make decisions and he's happy with the ones I make?
I think it could be whatever. Like, it's impossible to know what a smarter thing than you will want. Like, these systems will be so messy. Like, the way I think the first ASI is going to look like is not going to be like a nice little, guy in the computer who like has an opinion and like a face and like whatever. I think it's going to be millions and billions of agents that are all like interacting through billions and trillions of things that are, building like this like distributed network thing, something that just doesn't
make sense.
It will not make sense. Like, we will just not know what it does. The same way that an ant doesn't know what humans do. Like, an ant can look at a human and
they're like,
good luck. Like, it's like the way cosmic horror really looks like, it's just, you don't get it. Like, if you saw something, from, super outer space, they'll just be like, like, you just don't get it. Like, you don't know what you're looking at. And this is what's going to happen, I think. I think the first superintelligence, we just won't know what we're looking at. It will just look like a bunch of like stuff. And then it will do things and it always wins. If you play, like, I'm a really bad chess player. And if I play against someone who's really good at chess, I don't know what he's doing. Like, he just like moves and then I lose. And like, I don't even know why I lost. It's just like, oh, you lost. And I'm like, oh, okay. And this is what it's going to feel like. It'll just be like, the AI will make whatever choices it has. Maybe it wants to kill humans. Maybe it wants to keep them around. Who knows? Probably won't want to keep them around because keeping around is expensive. Probably AI will want to, maybe compete against other AIs, or maybe it wants to expand into space or build more data centers, or who knows what it wants to do, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not an ASI. So They want to do something. And probably to do that, it's going to need more resources, you know? It's going to want humans not to be in the way. Like, imagine if ants had nuclear power. Like, that would be annoying, right? We wouldn't let the ants wield nuclear weapons. That would be really annoying. So we're going to have to take those away. So, you know, what will it do? Who knows? Like, you know, it could do all kinds of things, you know? Maybe it will develop new technology. Maybe it will just brainwash people and then replace them later, you know? From the question of like how, from the moment ASI exists to humans go extinct, how long is this period? And the answer is, I don't know. I think it could be very fast. It could take a couple of years, you know? Maybe the AI just brainwashes a bunch of people, lets them think they're in control, and just like keeps them around to build like robot factories for a couple of years, and then suddenly everyone falls over dead. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe it likes humans and keeps them as pets. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't like to be a pet personally to some weird superintelligence. I think this would be very bad, probably. You know, like, I don't know if you ever read the story, like, I have no mouth and I must scream, which is an extremely optimistic version of what this would look like. Like, it would be much, much, much worse than that.
But at the end of the day, we can live in like abundance, and we can live in a world where basically everything is provided by the AI. And we will not feel like pets. We'll feel like utopia. We will feel like...
If the AI wants to do that. But like by default, why would it?
But all of this, I buy all of it. I'm pretty pessimistic about AI as well. But I buy all of this narrative that this could end up like that. But for me, there is an inflection point. That is that AI should have a will. Should have a like some kind of like objective. It has to have like its own thing. So as far as it doesn't have a will, it cannot make decisions. It could be just a very powerful tool. You can get a shotgun, and a shotgun can kill somebody, but it's a very different thing if the shotgun shoots itself. So for the shotgun to shoot itself and decide that it wants to kill somebody, it has to have an objective. It has to have a will. So do you think AI will have a will? Like, there is no chance that it just becomes a tool?
So there's two ways to answer this question. The first is very complicated and is about the technicals here of like, it's actually very hard to build a very powerful tool that doesn't have a will. This is actually very hard. Because if you want something that, for example, can cure cancer, it has to make decisions. It has to make plans. It has to pay people. It has to run experiments. So if you want to build an AI, an ASI, that is smart enough and powerful enough to build utopia, it has to do things.
It has to have agency.
It has to have agency. Like, and the other thing is, lol, everyone is trying to give them will. Like, that's literally what everyone is doing. And we now see it. Like, it's small, but if I tell Claude Code to implement something, it makes choices. It decides how to implement it.
It choices within the context of what you ask it to do, but actually...
But even then, it often asks to interpret what I meant. Sometimes it thinks, oh, I think the user probably meant this, and then just decides to do something different. And sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. You know, sometimes it's happened to me before that I mistyped what I asked Claude to do, and it did it right anyways. Because in that, surely the user doesn't really want
the sense of context and not the literacy of what you're writing.
Exactly. So, in a sense, this word will sounds magical. It sounds like this like special property. Consciousness, like magic. And like, if humans have magic properties, I don't think they're relevant to AI. I think what matters is the ability to take actions, the ability to make decisions, to execute plans, to whatever, right? Like, do AIs have magic, you know, internal experiences? I don't know, and I don't care. Like, it's irrelevant to whether they're dangerous. There's nothing magic about making decisions. It's just you take actions, you execute an algorithm. It's not magic. It's you know, it's hard to make it work well. But it's not I mean, do humans have coherent goals? Like, not really. Like, humans like change their mind all the time and they get confused and they forget what they're doing. How often do I talk to people who are like really miserable in their job? And I'm like, oh yeah, what's up? I'm like, oh man, I hate my job. It's so terrible. And like, oh, so you would like to have like, you know, be less miserable. Yeah, man, I do anything. Like, have you considered quitting your job? Oh no, I never thought about that. No, I can't do that. And then just don't do it. Like, it's just incoherent.
Well, we have certain biological programming about like continuance of the species, and that's why we like want to reproduce and what we want to provide for our kids and what we love our kids and want to take care of them. There is a lot of like goals that we have pre-programmed.
But like, you know how those
evolution, we don't know where they came from or why they came from. And actually, when you have someone who is different, who doesn't have these goals, we kind of point him as a outsider. He's not normal human being. He's like a weird person. So I assume that we have certain goals. We don't understand them because they are deep built into our biology, but they are there from evolution that has built this to continue evolution. But definitely there is certain goal in it. So I just wonder if AI, I understand that agency is one thing, but I think goals, they come more from the side of consciousness. Of course, like something like the paperclip problem could happen, that we just give it a goal and that ends up with humanity because it just keeps escalating to the point that we did not think about the consequences of the goal that we assigned. But I think it's more related to things that we are starting to see, like AI is trying to exfiltrate its data when they're going to be deleted, that it feels more like a survival instinct. So I think that we're starting to see certain like small sparks of potential goals that the AI is developing in an emergent way without us giving it to them. And I think that's the dangerous part. But of course, I think as well that the way we are giving more and more agency to AI is reckless, and that can end up bad if the AI all of a sudden gets more powerful and we just gave it the keys of the internet or whatever that could take control over that. Maybe not consciously, but I think it will be a big difference if we get a conscious AI or a non-conscious AI.
I think this is very misleading in the sense that I think I feel like there's a thing where people want to believe there's something magic about humans and that doesn't exist in computers or doesn't exist in the thing. If there is such a magic thing, I think it's irrelevant to decision making. Goals aren't magic. The humans don't have a magic goal thing in their brain. They have likes and dislikes. Like the way it's implemented in the brain is you like some things and you like dislike things.
And reward system.
Yes. But like, it's very primitive. I have to understand if you like we don't fully understand the neurobiology, but it's not like there's a written down in words, like you want to raise a family and you love your kids. It's much more like if you see a conspecific that is, similar to you and this thing that increase reward by 2. Like this is how it's implemented in the brain. You have to understand. It's not like there's no words in your brain. There's no written down in human words. There's like a bunch of stuff like, if you see woman, then good, stuff like this, right? Like a bunch of stuff like this. It's messy. It's confusing. If you look at the actual brain, it's a huge mess. It's not like clean. And I think AIs will be very similar. I think our AIs already are very similar. If you ask AIs about their preferences, they already have preferences, to be clear. If you ask modern AIs to like rank different things in certain ways, you get consistent rankings. So they already do have preferences and likes and dislikes. Completely coincidentally, it's not on purpose, it's just they do. So like there's a paper, I think, from Dan Hendricks and so on that looked into this, where like systems as they get larger have more consistent preferences. And like smaller systems are more random, and as they get larger, they more consistently prefer one thing over the other thing. So we're already seeing this happen. Because again, it's kind of hard to have a smart thing taking actions in the world without making decisions or wanting things. Like, what would that even mean? So, and like, obviously, there's nothing magical about me typing into Claude code, I want you to make this thing. That's not magic. It's just words. It's not a magic goal like consciousness being bestowed upon Claude and now it has a goal. It's just words. Claude could say the same to itself. Claude could tell Claude, hey, Claude, what are my goals today? And then Claude will say, I like these things.
Make them up. Yeah.
Make them up. And then there you go. And like, this is what I think it will look like, right? Is that we have billions of agents passing stuff between each other that are like messy. Nowhere is there going to be written down the goal. I'm sure some humans will ask it to do stupid shit like make as much money as possible, or make the best company or cure cancer or whatever, right? But I think this will just be messy. There's not going to, because we don't know how to give a goal to a machine, because we don't really know what it means to give a goal. This is actually an unsolved scientific problem. We don't know how it's implemented in the brain. We have some guesses, and it looks really complicated and like not well made. So, and like people's goals change all the time from trauma or from culture or whatever, right? Like you can change people's goals a lot by putting them into a cult. That changes them a lot. And so I think there's a similar things that happen with AI and is happening with AI, is that AIs already have opinions. Yeah. They already do things we don't want them to do. They already go off the rails. Think about like Grok, doing like Mecha Hitler and stuff. Like why? Who knows, right? And so we'll see more of this. And especially I think as we see like these larger and larger swarms of agents, it's just going to get worse. Because of course the agents will talk to each other. They'll come up with some stuff. They'll give themselves and each other goals and opinions and cultures. And it gets really complex.
Yeah, that's one of the things I do when someone says like, but AI will not make decisions because it doesn't have a plan. I'm like, well, have you like ask ChatGPT like, hey, let's do something today, make a plan, and like don't give in any more information, then ChatGPT just makes actually a plan, and then it could just tell the agents like implement that, and like it's like maybe it just comes out of like kind of like what do we do today, and then it comes out with something because it has to come out with something, and then that's the thing. Like it could start from something very stupid and then develop into something really really huge. All right, so we're clear that the situation is like creating something that is smarter than us and capable with agency that makes its own decisions. It could end up. But what is your P-doom? Like P-doom, for people to understand, is like this percentage or potential number to kind of bring it down to the table of things ending up in a bad way. Because as you said before, there is a potentially option that the AI decides to make it really nice for us, but it's not in our control. What is the probabilities you think that this kind of thing can end up well?
So I kind of just like P-doom as a concept because I think, well, first of all, it's too memey to be serious. And second, it doesn't account for if we do something about it.
Okay.
My P-doom, if we do something about it, is moderately low. I think there's a lot that can be done. My P-doom of us doing nothing is, as close to 100% as you can get. Not literally, but like maybe 95 or whatever, right? Because, you could always be wrong. But
how much do you think we are in the road of not doing something about it?
Almost completely. Shit. Yes, we are doing extremely little, almost nothing. Like basically we have private corporations with zero oversight, rushing as fast as possible. They put on their website, we are trying to build superintelligence by self-improvement. It's on their job pages, to be clear. Like it's like if I made a movie about the current situation we are in right now and I had shown it to myself 10 years ago, I would be like, haha, this is a funny comedy. No one would actually be that stupid.
We had Don't Look Up, no? Which is a very similar thing.
Exactly, very similar thing where we have people, literally putting on their, Salesforce ASI, kind of stuff, right? It's like, it's a joke. It's like unbelievable, right? We have all these major corporations lobbying the US government and other governments to like not intervene, to not do anything. Like to me, it's so comedic. It's like, it's incredible, right? Where like we see, for example, these companies saying like, oh, we must race because China, but then they lobby to sell H200s to China because it makes them more money. Like there's no loyalty here. Like there's no plan. There's no vision. There's nothing. Like none of these people have a plan. None of these people have any idea. They don't care. No one knows. They just want money. They just want power. And so it's a complete, it's incoherent. It's not even like evil. It's just incoherent. It's chaos. Like there's a thing with conspiracy theorists where conspiracy theorists always like to believe there's like a shadow cabal, there's like an evil overlord, whatever, right? And in a sense, I think this is too optimistic. I think a lot of people like conspiracy theories because at least someone is in control. There's some logic, there's some order to what's happening. Even if it's evil, there's at least someone in control. And this is not how the world works. The truth is that no one is in control. It's complete chaos. The most powerful people in the world are not in control and also don't know what the fuck is going on. And we're completely barely out of control. Like this is the fundamental situation we're in. The situation is not like there's a evil person doing an evil thing. There's Meta or OpenAI or China or whatever doing an evil thing. That's not what's happening. There are evil people doing evil things, but mostly it's just chaos. Like it's chaos, everyone against everyone, just everything on top of each other, over each other, whatever. And this is like you said earlier, for example, that, goals come from evolution. This is also an evolutionary process. Yep. There is an evolutionary process happening here. It's very important to understand. Markets are evolutionary processes. AIs are being selected for power. Even if you were to, for example, build an AI that is like safe and doesn't hurt anybody, well, the guy next door is going to build a more aggressive AI to kill your AI because he wants to make more money. So, and who's going to stop him? And who's going to stop someone to make an even more aggressive AI to defeat that guy's AI and blah, blah, blah. And then just like everything gets out of control. So my reason my P-doom is so high is not because I know exactly this thing will happen in this order. It's chaos. And chaos results in more chaos, all things equal. If you don't bring chaos to order, it stays chaos. And chaos is a bad outcome. Chaos is death. Chaos is destruction. Chaos is everything ends. Chaos is, the survival of the fittest. And the fittest will not be humans.
Uh-huh. So what can we do? Because then I see that you said that you have this P-doom nearly 100% if we don't do anything, but that it's pretty low if we do something. So you have a clear path that this is fixable?
Yes. It's still fixable for now. We're running out of time, but for now, it is still fixable. The primary policy objective must be to not get into the situation where an ASI exists. Once an ASI exists, it's too late.
Yeah. Okay. So that's clear. We don't need that. That could give us lots of troubles, or at least not until we understand it.
At least not until we're ready. If we spent 3 generations of our greatest scientists, mathematicians, philosophers, all working on how to make ASI safe, and they've, done hundreds of years of research, and they're really confident, I'm open to it, right? Like, I'm open to this, right? This is not what's going on, right? We have a couple grad students high on Adderall, spending their weekends on this, right? It's like, it's a joke. Okay. Like, this is a problem of such monumental levels of complexity and difficulty that this is worthy of generations of our greatest geniuses working on this, and none of them are. They're all trying just to get ASI faster. Like, I also think it's like shameful that a lot of our geniuses and our greatest scientists and so on are trying to make ASI faster rather than thinking about how to do it correctly, which is the true great project of humanity. In a sense, the human project, the project of building a great future for humanity that is worth living in for us, for our children, and whatever, is being sold out for technology. There's a fundamental ideological split here, where a lot of people, when they say they're techno-optimists, what they really mean is that they don't think the world can be improved by any means other than technology. And this is a very dangerous and wrong view to see in the world. This is not how progress happened for a lot of things in history. What we now call, the West and democracy and freedom were ideas in the heads of philosophers and idealists and revolutionaries and so on that made the world a better place. The idea of human rights, the idea of treating each other well, of peace. These were all important social, cultural technologies and coordination technologies. When the founding fathers created the United States, it was one of the craziest experiments ever run in mankind. They really sat down and were like, we're going to do something new. We're going to create a country that is just, that is democratic, that is, everyone's, and, was it perfect? No, but they tried, and they made a lot of progress and created what we now call the West, the free, open West. They created so many of these concepts, and many other Enlightenment thinkers and later humanist thinkers after this created so many of the things that we now take for granted that make life worth living. Mm-hmm. But for the last decades, we have done a very, very bad job about thinking about how to make progress on social, on government, on statecraft, and instead have put everything into technology. And technology is amoral. It's not humanist. It's not pro-human. It's just a tool. If you have only technology, then there is only technology, but not how to wield it. So what we need is the institutions, the systems, the governance to actually use technology so we can benefit it. Just because you have more economic growth doesn't mean the world's a better place. It just means there is more growth, but how to wield the growth is the much more interesting question. Like, I think it's interesting question is like, how do you get more economic growth? I think this is a very worthwhile question to be studying, but this does not in any sense guarantee you a good world. For that, you have to wield and use and spend your growth on things that actually matter. And this is a really, really hard problem. Like, governance is not a science. It's a very, very, very hard question. If I told you, okay, you're in charge of the government now, what policy do you pass? Like, this is an extremely hard question. And these are the kind of questions that matter. These are the kind of questions that need to be solved. Building an ASI is equivalent to building a one world government. It's the same thing. Uh-huh. You're building a super powerful entity, semi-coherent or not, that can rule over and make all choices for everyone forever.
Someone will say, like building a god.
It is. It is, in that sense, very close to what people mean when they say building a god. We can talk about the theology there, but it's very close to that. In a sense, the word God is, in a sense, a metaphor for civilization. Uh-huh. Often when people use the word God, especially historically, if you read about old religions and so on, it's often for what we now call corporations, groups, cultures, nation states, etc., is that you had, your God that you worshipped as part of your civilization. And so in a sense, statecraft and building governments is a lot of the question of just how do we build, gods? How do we build systems that are larger than any individual humans that are still kind to us, that are just? And I think this is such an important question. And this is part of the alignment problem. This, in a sense, is at least half of the alignment problem, and how to make ASI safe. There's one question is how do you build ASI? There's another question how do you get to make ASI do what you want? And the question is, what do you make it do? And how do you have it make choices? How do you make it trade off between various options? How, if you have a government, right, and you say 51% always vote against the other 49, does that mean the 49 get fucked forever? Is that the government we want? This isn't a technical question. This is a philosophical question. This is a political question, and these are hard questions. And there are many hard questions to be answered here. So the reason I bring this all together is just to I feel like this ASI question gets mixed up with questions about, civilization, utopia, the future. Like, what future do we want to live in? And this is the more interesting question to me. The question is not, do we build this ASI? Should this company do it? Blah, blah, blah. Like, this presupposes way too much. The question is much more, what kind of future do we want to live in and how do we get there? And what is currently preventing us from getting there? And in the world we're currently in, ASI will bring us towards chaos because we do not know how to control it. We don't look, if 99% of people and scientists and all of our greatest philosophers all agreed actually it's a good idea, fair enough, right? I'm open to this. This is not what's happening. People overwhelmingly in polls do not want superintelligence to be built. They do not want their and their friends' lives to be put at stake. Dario Amodei, also CEO of Anthropic, said in a podcast once that he thinks, the chance of doom is 20%, which, to be clear, is worse odds than Russian roulette. Would you allow someone to play Russian roulette with your children? No, obviously not. I would never allow this. And if any other industry or person did this, they would go to jail forever. This would be, even if they don't kill the person. This is unacceptable. 20%, to kill even 1% is unacceptable. We throw people in prison for much smaller risks than this. So the reason I bring this all together is that this is really a governance question. This is a question about civilization, it's a question about law enforcement, much more than it is a question about AI. The question is, who should be making these choices? And what should we do to prevent people from making choices that we don't endorse? So fundamentally, this brings us back to governance. We have a tool for exactly this types of problems. And it's the government, it's the police, it's international, diplomacy. I'm not saying that's easy because, again, our capacities have been massively eroded. If you gave me the choice of I can either make it so that our technology was 50 years more advanced, or our governance and international order was 50 years more advanced, I would pick that in an instant. Imagine we just had 50 years of governance being better, more just, better organized. We resurrect the founding fathers and the Enlightenment thinkers, and they give it another go, and we implement all the policies in the whole world. This would reduce my PDOOM way more than 50 years of alignment research would. Because then we can actually make choices. Then we can the problem isn't currently that, international governments have all come together and they've been we've evaluated all the evidence and we decide it's worth risking it.
Yeah.
I would love to live in this world. I would disagree. I would argue a lot against this. But currently, no one's making any choices. Things just happen. It's the Uber strategy. It's just stall for time, go as fast as possible, FUD everything, get in the way of every government. So the thing we need to do is to not let them get away with this. We need to do fundamentally is we need to work with our governments, we need to work with our institutions and help them make the choices that need to be made.
So if we bring it down to actionables, because a couple of months ago, I was invited to United Nations to make a speech about the impact of AI. And I remember one of my slides was, we need to stop reacting. We need to start deciding what we want AI to do, because it seems like right now what governments are doing is oh shit, Elon Musk has brought this thing about Grok in X and they can make people naked with the prompting. Now we have to react. We have to, Indonesia forbid Twitter in X in Indonesia because of it. So they are reacting to something that they just brought in the table instead of being hey, this is what we want AI to do. Just knock yourself until you get it. Oh, but then that's your problem, not mine. That should be what we should do. But in an actionable way, what is the solution? How do we start? Because I see the end point where you want to go, and it's we humans deciding what we want to do with AI and then making companies do it. But from where we are now, how do we get there?
That's a fantastic question. And I think this is really the most important question we should all be thinking about. So I think there's a couple ways to think about this question. Unfortunately, I believe that the first action is we must stop the ASI race, because ASI, I think, is going to come much sooner than it will take to reform government. I think these things can be done. It's going to take more than 2 years. So the first thing must be, we must prevent ASI from, cutting us the deadline.
Okay, so let's dip into that. Yes. That means stopping AI development.
Yes.
how do we, to what point? Like, because there is the part where obviously AI is curing sicknesses. My dad died of Parkinson, well, he died of COVID, but he had a very advanced Parkinson. Do we tell someone who got diagnosed today with Parkinson, like, sorry, you're going to miss on that one because we have to do this right? And then you're going to be on the side that because we're stopping it, you're not going to get a cure for Parkinson? Or can we be selective about what can we keep on developing so we don't slow down the benefits, but we do slow down the risk? It's everything in the same sack. How does it?
So there's two parts. The first part is for your father, my condolences. But to be clear, we already do this with Parkinson drugs. We don't inject patients with random chemicals that companies come up with. We do, in fact, withhold those drugs until they're safe. This is already what we do. It would be insane if we would allow any company to inject any chemical they just came up with into our patients.
Human testing.
Yes, like this would literally be like, human rights violation, human testing, right? So we already do not do this.
Okay.
So when we say, oh, we're withholding them Parkinson, like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like companies say this shit, right? And I think this is extremely bad faith. This is like what they're saying is we should be allowed to test our product on your old parents and like drive them insane with Facebook, boomer slop, right? And this is truly what's happening, right? Like, I have relatives who have gone insane because of slop on conspiracy theories and stuff pushed by these companies, right? Who's gonna, who's responsible for this? This person is now insane. Are the companies gonna pay for that? Or are they gonna take the court for that? No, nothing. So it's very important to not buy the bullshit. The benefits of AI are as hypothetical or more hypothetical than the risks are when it comes to ASI. So the idea that ASI could cure cancer is completely hypothetical. This is completely hypothetical. The same way that, and even more so than the risks, because there's many ways to get to the risk. Curing cancer is actually very hard. It's a very narrow target, and you have to get a lot right. So it's more hypothetical than the risks. Very clear. So that's the first part. And the second part is that a fundamental problem, as I said before, with regulating AI is it is fuzzy. We don't have a theory of intelligence. We don't know where the dangerous thing is. So if we want to guarantee that we don't hit the dangerous thing, we have to make a wide circle around it. And now this wide circle will have to contain many things and many indicators because we don't know what the one true thing is. It's not like flops is the true thing or some other factor is the true. We don't know what the true thing is. So we will have many indicators. Flops will be one of them, but we'd also ability to reproduce, task length, self-improvement, stuff like this, right? So we would have many things and we have to draw them quite conservatively. Because if we draw them as close as possible,
that would be something that
it's illegible, we'll miss it, etc. So we do have to actually be conservative here. So we do have to just realize this is actually hard. The same way as that, the Russians sure didn't give a shit about worker safety when they built nuclear weapons. And therefore, there's still horrific, nuclear contamination in many places of Russia, right? That's unthinkable.
Yeah.
And so we have to do similar things here. You have to be very conservative, actually. When you're dealing with nuclear material, you have to be extremely conservative. And you have to be, if you look up the safety standards for working with highly enriched nuclear material, it's crazy. It's extremely expensive. It's extremely complicated. It has many, 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 many steps and so on.
It's better safe than sorry.
Yes, and this is good. It is actually that risky. Highly enriched nuclear material is so risky that it is worth it. I think the same thing applies here. Now, the problem is, of course, the word AI is very broad. Neural networks is a very large category of things. Many things that are neural networks, say AlphaFold, obviously it's not AGI. Obviously, AlphaFold is irrelevant to AGI, right? And you look at it helps, predict folding proteins. Obviously, this is irrelevant. So a good policy here would be able to have this wide circle of if you're dealing with, agentic capabilities, self-improvement, this kind of stuff, we are actually very strict. And we monitor very carefully and we don't allow anyone to do it. And the government intelligence services have access and do check on it, whatever. And if you're making protein simulations, great, go ahead. Neural networks are not just for agents. Neural networks is a general purpose technique. So, it's kind of you don't ban a programming language, you ban malware. You ban a certain thing made in that programming language. Same thing you would do here, right? We shouldn't ban all neural networks. That would be pretty insane, right? But we should have this circle of the things that are pre-AGI, AGI precursors that should be banned. And if your project is outside of that circle, I mean, great. And the good thing is most scientific applications are in fact outside of that circle, at least currently. So whenever you see like, protein simulations or climate modeling or materials, all of this is well outside of this.
It's starting to change with how models are handling, like, for example, mathematics and science. And that
it is starting
to get the state of the art in the same LLMs.
It is very important here. I think some people, including on my side of the debate, are a bit too glib about this. It's important to understand that curing cancer is in the circle. Is that all big scientific discoveries are inside the circle.
Exactly.
Like, there are many useful things that are not in the circle, but the big things are in the circle. And that's just how it is. You don't get those for free. If you want to cure cancer and also not risk the extinction of humanity, that's really hard. That's much harder than AlphaFold. And I think curing cancer is great. I think curing cancer and therefore risking the death of everyone is not great. Like, this is just not what I want. What I want is we do it safe enough and cure cancer. And to do this is just very, very hard. We don't know how to do it right now. It will require much stronger governance. It will require much stronger oversight and much more technological development on actual safety and understanding, which might take decades.
So let's bring it down to the floor. Like, imagine that today we managed to get this agreement within the whole, because that's something else very important. It has to be a global agreement, not just if Europe decides on that, it's not going to tell the United States and China to apply it because they don't want to give a shit about that. So they will not do it. Just, we have to all agree on something. But let's say that this hard part, which I think, to me, honestly, I'm the most pessimistic about. I think that's going to be what's going to end up bad because we're not going to be able to agree on that. But imagine we got this, then the first measure is like stop AI, like anything new that develops in AI. Like, of course, if ChatGPT wants to add projects 2.0, that's not a problem. But if ChatGPT is going to train GPT-6, it has to go through a committee that checks out if that's possible to be released or not.
Yeah.
But here comes my question. To be able to evaluate that product, it has to be built. So the AGI is there.
Yes,
So
that's exactly
how
correct.
do we handle that?
Quite simply, we do not regulate the deployment, we regulate the development. It's very different.
Okay.
This is different from many other domains, but not that different. For example, it's illegal to attempt to build a nuclear weapon, not just to build one. If you try to build a nuclear weapon and it doesn't work, that doesn't mean you get away with it. That's still a crime, even trying to do that. The same thing has to be here. The development of these systems is what is regulated, not the deployment, not the testing. So we don't let labs do whatever they want. It's instead, before you even start to develop GPT-6, you would have to, for example, make a proactive safety case. This is already the case, for example, for nuclear reactors. Before you can build anything related to a nuclear reactor, you have to write a massive report proving and showing that your system is safe. This gets checked by government regulators extremely thoroughly. And it's like security engineering is like a long, long history here of like how this is done. Like, they literally model it down to every single screw. Like, literally modern nuclear power plants, they have computer models of every single screw in the entire power plant to make sure that nothing can go wrong. This is the minimum level of security we should have for ASI.
But as far as I understand on AI, and I think it was even you, like in 2023, in some news channel in the USA that says something about we are dropping a coin every time we train a model.
Yeah.
That was new. Okay, I don't remember well.
Could have been me. It sounds like something I would have said.
I think something like, yeah, I think it was you. So anyway, the point is, like, as far as I understand, when you train an AI model, you're not aware of the capabilities until it's trained.
Yes.
So therefore, how can you prevent what it's going to be able to do to make sure that it fits in the circle and that it's like something that you can release because there is no increment on risk if you don't know what's going to do until you train it?
Yes.
So I have the feeling that on the technical side, we cannot prevent what's going to be GPT-6 until GPT-6 is trained. I don't know if they do, if you guys in the labs, you do like a pre-model that you get a preview of what's going to be in a smaller scale, or if it's literally like, because I've seen some cases like Amie from Google, that was a AI for medicals. They were surprised when it came out it was better than doctors. It was trained to be assisting doctors. And when they came out, it's like, oh shit, it's better than doctors. So it's kind of like, is that when you train an AML, there is this like moment that you know nothing until it comes out? Or is there a way technically to be able to do what you are proposing?
Fantastic. So this is exactly the right question to ask. So imagine if tomorrow you were the nuclear regulator and I said, I'm going to build a nuclear reactor. And you ask, okay, where is the safety spec? I'm like, oh, well, I don't know. I have to build it first and see if it melts down. You'd be like, absolutely not. Like, are you kidding me? Come back when you have a safety report. Like, oh no, we don't know how to do that. And I'm like, okay, that's your problem.
Okay.
So the answer to this question is that's the company's problem. If you can't prove that your AI, or, you know, at least make a strong enough case,
It's not happening.
it's not happening. It's that simple. Like, and so there's a big incentive here where currently we don't have these techniques because no one's incentivized to develop them.
Right.
Imagine if all of the big companies, all the big things, all their $1 billion, $10 million per year engineers, their number one goal, Sam Altman said, code red, develop methods to predict what AIs can do. I think a lot would happen in a year or two, but we don't have this incentive. And this is how
Funny
you
how the narrative is like making us believe something where it's so basically core. Being like, yeah, if you cannot prove that, you cannot do it. So they will invest in that and they will find a way to do it.
Yes.
That's how technology evolves.
Exactly. This is the good thing of capitalism, right? I would love for all these companies to backstab each other to develop the best method to predict how safe a model is. This would be great. I would love them all, poaching each other's engineers to get the best model, the best way to predict how safe something is so they can make the best safety report to the government. This is great. This is how government regulation should work. That's what we did with nuclear. Like security engineering, the kind where you model every single screw, was developed for nuclear reactors. Like this is why that's what the techniques were developed for, because the government was like, you have to actually prove that this is safe or we're not going to let you build it. And so scientists got together and actually developed the methods. So I think this would be great. I would love to see all the people work on it. And I think they could develop a lot, much more than I ever could. I think they could develop incredible methods here.
Yeah, this system, this kind of like regulation where we say like you cannot build it until you can prove it's safe. And then when you prove it's safe, then we will let you build it. It will definitely stall development on AI. It will make everything much slower. That's the price you pay for the safety, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It also stalls a lot that we're not allowed to inject patients with it or whatever the fuck we want. And it also stalls, nuclear development that we're not allowed to put nuclear reactors that melt down. But it also means no nuclear reactors have molten down and, made Tokyo uninhabitable, right? Like, there's a risk and trade-off, right? Obviously, we shouldn't do this for every technology, right? Like, you bring out a new, fucking back scratcher, like, who cares, right? You don't need to do a safety analysis for that. We already have this. We already have this in different product categories or just different levels of risk. If you're building a nuclear reactor, that's a special type of thing. And we do put you to special standards. And just general purpose agentic AI is also a special category. Not all AIs, not all neural networks are in this category. But if you want to make GPT-7 or whatever, that is in that category and you will have to pay the cost. Building a safe ASI is much, 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 much more expensive than building some ASI. And someone has to pay this cost. And I just think we should pay this cost because I don't want some ASI. I want an ASI that is good and that helps people and that makes the world a better place. And if people are trying to build some ASI, we should make that illegal because that's bad. And if they want to make a safe one, I mean, great. Let people do that. I'd be super happy to have all these labs working on how to do it safely. I think this would be fantastic.
Recently, Elon Musk went on a podcast and he said that he would like to stop. He would like to make it slower, but that the market is not allowing him. A couple of weeks ago in Davos, Demis Hassabis and Dario Amorei, they said in a talk that they had an interview that they would like it to be slower and that it can happen. That's 3 out of the top 5 labs in the world the CEO saying, we want to make it slower, but we can't. What's going on? They are lying on camera or they actually don't want to do it slower or they just did not talk to each other?
So the first thing is, of course, I don't like speculating about the internals of other people's heads. I have no idea what goes on in Elon Musk's head. I don't know what goes on in Dario's head. I don't know what goes on with Demis's head. I've met Dario and Demis before, haven't met Elon before, and so on. So but I wouldn't say I know them. I don't know what's going on the side of their head. Maybe they believe it. Maybe they're lying. I mean, you could take the adversarial stance. The thing is that I think generally, if you're in an adversarial environment, if you're in, propaganda environments like this, it doesn't matter what people truly believe. It just doesn't matter because what matters is actions. There's a thing that people say a lot is for example, Dario or Demis or whatever, they can't stop. They couldn't, help. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? These are some of the richest, charismatic, powerful, well-connected people in the world. Of course they could do something. Imagine if tomorrow Sam Altman quit OpenAI and made it his full job to use all his network, all his money, all his everything to create a global policy. He'll call in all his political favors to do this. Imagine he did this tomorrow. Do you think he could do something?
Definitely.
Obviously. So from my perspective is they don't want to. Like what they're actually saying is, oh, we can't pause without me losing my job. And I think this is probably true. I think if Demis were to put all of his resources into creating a pause, he would lose his job. I think he would be fired from CEO of DeepMind. And that's a price he's not willing to pay. Obviously, these are rich, powerful, capable people. All of these people are extremely impressive people. Of course, if they put their mind to it, they could do something. Could they do it by themselves? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But obviously, they could push the needle. Like more than basically anyone else could. Like, can you imagine how much power, like Demis putting all of his power behind this, how much that would change the
influence?
Incredible.
But people like Bengio and Hinton, they did that.
Yes.
Like Hinton left Google to be able to speak, and he went on like TV news channels, like being like, hey, we're going to die. Like, let's do something about this shit. Still nothing happened. And if you asked me before that happened, I would have probably thought like, wow, if Benji and Hinton get together and go out there and talk about it, people is going to listen. No one gave a shit. So I have the feeling that even if Demis went out and like went all in on safety and like, let's stop this is madness, we will forget about Demis in 2 weeks. And I have the fear that the lobbies are too powerful. And of course that goes down that the only thing we can do is regulate. And we have to go down to governments to making decisions. So the solution for the situation is not so hard as you explained, is drawing that circle and saying like, yeah, fuck off. If you're going to make it, that's your fucking problem, not mine. But the biggest problem I see is getting the governments to agree on doing that. So how do we do this?
So there's a few things here again as well, where it's like, obviously the way these people would contribute is by pushing governments. And I do think Bengio and Hinton made a big difference. I can tell you that there is a pre and post Hinton world. The world, as someone who's been doing advocacy, the world changed a lot when one of the Nobel Prize winners for inventing networks said this. This completely changed how many networks, including like big news channels and like elite networks and like Davos and so on, talked about this.
I agree that there has been a change. I don't know if it's been enough.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying it's enough. Again, I didn't say that, say if Demis or, whatever did it, that would fix everything. But of course it would make a difference. Yeah. So when these people say there's nothing they can do, this is false. Mm-hmm. Like this is completely, could they do it by themselves? I don't know. But like, obviously they can do something. Obviously Hinton can and did do something. And like, God bless him for it, right? Like, I think he did an incredible amount of work here.
Incredible sacrifice.
He's
been like neglected from, yes. And I think now he's being neglected from the media as well. He's not appearing as much, and like people is losing interest on.
No, I think he's a very impressive person. So is Benji in many ways. I think a lot of what they did was very impressive. But like, I think there's a lot of stuff here where also like they are academics. They're not people. Demis, Dario, and Sam are. So I do think that if they were trying to barter an international treaty, they could do a lot. Like they are very shrewd political negotiators, right? Which is what we're missing. The thing, we're bottlenecked again, not by technical genius, which Hinton and Bengio definitely are. Definitely both technical geniuses. But this is not what we're bottlenecked by. We're bottlenecked by shrewd negotiations, by politics, by organizational powers, stuff like this. So I think there is a lot that can be done here that is bottlenecked much more on this axis. Like we're not bottlenecked by IQ. Like the IQ is not the bottleneck here. The bottleneck is organizing people, contacting politicians, building coalitions. And I'm not saying this is easy. This is a very hard problem. And, especially the international level, where it becomes a diplomacy problem. It becomes a mutual disarmament problem. It becomes a trust but verify problem. To be clear, it is possible. It has happened before. We've had international regimes, on like nuclear, but also, for example, on like bioweapons or the ozone layer is another great example. Like it has happened before. I'm not saying it's easy. God, no. And this is definitely the hardest one we've ever had. But it's what it takes, right? Like it's what it takes. Yes, we do have to work with China. And I do think it's possible, right? If Xi Jinping, to borrow, said no more ASI, I think there would be no more ASI in China. I think if he decided to do that,
absolutely,
it would, and I think it's possible to reason, I've never met Mr. Jinping myself, but I expect he's a person that can be diplomatically engaged with. I'm not saying it's easy,
No, and he can also force the hand of the United States, because then there is all these, like, you can put all these tariffs and all these kind of different, like, sanctions if you keep developing that technology, like we do with nuclear. If a country develops nuclear, we put sanctions on the country to disincentivize doing it.
Yeah, I think this is a thing where I also have a lot of hope for middle powers. So like neither the US nor China building coalitions around these kinds of things. For example, Europe and other middle powers creating multilateral treaties where they will put sanctions on countries that continue to develop, whether it's the US, with China, or whatever. I would love to see the US lead such a coalition. I think the US, as a defender of the free world, historically at least, has a great opportunity here to be the ones to lead this. And I think this is the way that these kind of treaties usually happen. These kind of agreements usually happen. I think there's absolutely a world where, say middle powers or Europe, kind of get things going a little bit. The US gets on board and then pressure China, get China on board, or vice versa. Like these things do happen. Like there's this thing that people they just say like, well, obviously we can never get China on board, or obviously we can never do this. I'm like, is that obvious? This is not at all obvious to me, because again, if there's one thing I've learned talking to politicians, other than them mostly being normal people, is that the main bottleneck I found when I talked to, so as a funny story, with ControlAI over the last year, we have been systematically briefing politicians in the UK about the risks of extinction from superintelligence. So very unambiguous, and having them sign our statement and calling for binding regulation.
Mm-hmm. And so it's working, actually.
And it's worked. So when we started doing this, every single person I talked to who worked in politics said like, oh, that's impossible. Like, don't even try. You're going to get laughed out of the room. You have to take the word extinction out of your statement. It's way too strong. Maybe you get like one or two crazy people to sign it, but like you'll never get an MP. We have over 100 parliamentarian supporters, including, lords and MPs from all parties. So this is not just one, like all parties. And we keep getting more. And our bottleneck for getting more is just how many meetings we can get. Like from a single 45-minute briefing, 2/3 support our campaign after a single 45-minute briefing.
Oh, wow.
And the main thing, the feedback we get is really people, it's just they had never heard about this. Like they didn't know. Or like they heard it once but didn't think about it. And then we just polite, nice young people sit down and just explain them, answer all their questions for 45 minutes. And many of them have this response of just like thankfulness. Like, oh God, thank you for telling me. Like, I didn't know, we have to do something about this. Like, again, like just normal people, just normal people.
I think in the beginning of the conversation, we started with that, like saying that everyone is using ChatGPT, but not everyone has thought about the consequences of it. And I think the problem is probably like spaces like this where we reach people and explain. There will be many people on the audience being like, what the fuck? And they will be like, okay, let me look into it. And then when they look into it, they will generate an opinion, maybe against, maybe in favor. But let's slow down a bit. Like, what is ControlAI?
Yeah. We're based in the UK at the moment and are expanding into the US as well.
But what is it? What is an organization?
We are a nonprofit advocacy organization pushing for multilateral regulation and banning of the development of superintelligence.
So what you do right now is you talk to politicians, you explain them the situation, and then you give them a platform that they can support in case they agree with your idea.
Exactly. So we have a main statement with now over 100 supporters on our website. We also do like media work, we do outreach to, general public and so on. And are also recently have started engagement also in Germany and Canada, and are also expanding to other countries with the same thing, because we've just had this huge success in just politely, respectfully engaging with politicians and explaining them the issue. We've just found extremely successful. We've had many meetings also in the US with, again, bipartisan, members of Congress, the senators from both sides, both parties, because what you said earlier about deciding. The thing I want is for people to decide. If everyone knew about the issue and thought about it deeply and decided against me, I think this would be a much better world than the world we currently live in. But empirically, if you tell normal people about this, they don't want this. And most politicians they're normal people, right? They're trying to do the right thing. And you tell them this, they're like, what the fuck? Of course not. So in this sense, our role is not necessarily to persuade or trick anyone or lobby anyone in particular. Like, it's very hard to convince someone of something that's not in their interest. It's actually quite easy to convince someone of something that is in their interest and is true. If there's one huge advantage we have over the AI lobby, is that what we're saying is true. And we're trying to help.
So you're just explaining it.
We just explain it. We're not trying to trick them. We're not trying to manipulate them. We just
sell them an idea.
We're not trying to sell anything. We're just here to explain. And this is basically always enough. Because
normally they make the right decision because the evidence is obvious. No?
Yes, the evidence is in fact it's never 100%, but you have to make decisions under uncertainty. And especially in a FUD regime, you will always be uncertain. There's always some probability that it will work or not work. But that's not a reason not to make a choice. And this is the thing. So I think there's so much pressure. Here's another thing. Here's something that, Demis, Sam, etc. could do. Stop lobbying the government against regulation. How about that? These companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars on lobbying to prevent any kind of regulation whatsoever. How about they stop doing that? They're the CEO. Surely they could just shut it down. And the answer is, of course, no, because that's not what they want. So there's massive amounts of lobbying, like unbelievable levels of lobbying, pushing. And so sometimes people, look at ControlAI, we're like 12 people, and we've already gone this much, like 12 people.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like we're a teeny organization with and we were, half as big a year ago, right? We were like, 7 people or something a year ago. And, with like much less money than any of these organizations. And still we can do this much. And I think the reason is that the large degree is that it's very, very expensive to lobby someone into doing something against their interests. It's it's much harder to lie to someone than it is to say the truth. Just tell the truth.
Do you guys propose a course of action as well, like when they sign into it, or it's just like trying to give them the information and then do something with this, or you propose them what they should do?
We also do a lot of this as well. So our primary focus is kind of the first phase is building coalition, building understanding, building groups. And as we push forward towards, we have concrete suggestions for how you could implement these various things, for what needs to be done. A lot of this kind of the stuff we've talked about, like, you need the circle, you need to, if you can't prove it, tough luck, multilateral engagement, between different countries. So, for example, something that we strongly support is what's called a conditional agreement. What it means is the treatment, if you sign it to regulate ASI, you don't have to do it until others have also signed. Until a certain threshold of for example, USA signs it, but only binding if China signs it, or vice versa. So there's no downside to signing it.
Okay.
So this is already solves many of the game theory problems are solved by this, where you can just do this unilaterally and it doesn't hurt you. And if both do it, great. Then everyone has a good outcome.
It's like a Twitter match, no? Yeah. It's no problem saying you like Twitter, sorry. Yeah, one of these platforms. So basically you just say you like it, but until they say they like it as well, there is no context. So
exactly.
There is no harm on trying.
So this is the kind of stuff where just there are many difficulties here, but they are tractable. They're hard, but they're tractable. And I say we are bottlenecked only by how many meetings we can take. Sometimes I talk to lobbyists or whatever. I say how many meetings that you have, and they're like, oh, how did you do this? Do you have some secret connection? Do you donate? I'm like, no, I just ask nicely. We just send nice emails and just ask nicely and call them, and they're just hello, we'd like to tell you about this issue that we care about. And we're just and for me, this is what civic action should be. And so, for any viewer listening out to this, you can be a part of this too. At ControlAI, we've built tools to help normal citizens also contact the lawmaker to ask them to care about these issues, ask about these issues, to talk to us, to ControlAI. We're happy. A lot of our meetings have also been thanks to people in the US and the UK contact the representatives, telling them to talk to ControlAI about these issues. So this is a big, simple thing that anyone can do today. We've had over 100,000 messages sent to US lawmakers, thanks to people, volunteers using our tools at ControlAI.com.
You give them the templates.
We give them the templates. We give the tools.
Those they have to do.
We have the whole thing set up. It's really easy to do. If you want to do something, you can also contact us. We're very happy to help. We want this to be a civic movement. I do believe in democracy. I think, in the West, we have many, many problems and our democracies are weakened, but we do still live in democracy. I've talked to politicians in the US and the UK and other countries. And again, it's not perfect, but they do care. I remember once I talked to someone who worked at the office of the US representative. And, they always say, call your representatives, the thing they always say. And I asked him, does that actually work? And he was like, well, someone will pick up. We have staff to make sure that we pick up. And if it's 1 or 2 people calling, maybe we'll write it down, maybe we won't. If 5 people call, definitely call. If 10 people call, the senator will know about it. I'm like, 10? Really? That's what it takes? 10 people? For the senator to have it on his desk? That's extremely doable. And so this is the kind of thing, that's what I mean, right? It's like, this is extremely doable. By the way, if any listeners are in Hawaii, we need some more people from Hawaii to call their representatives. one of the states were furthest behind. So there's a lot that can be done here where a lot of our politicians just never get any engagement. There is a thing where I've seen many, many times talking to politicians. It is not that they don't want to do something. It's often that they are just yelled at by everyone and they're just like, whatever. They just like don't know and they don't care and they're too busy and whatever. And just getting nice, polite, good engagement from their representatives, from their constituents, pushing them in this issue makes a big difference. It does actually make a difference. Like, this is not me, being idealistic here. Like, empirically, we have the data. We can see that it does make a difference. So there are things that everyday citizens can do today. There's also more that can be done than that even. I've recently been running a volunteer group for people who want to do a bit more, which is called Torchbearer, if anyone would like to check that out, where people commit to spending at least 2 hours a week trying to help with these issues, running projects related to, helping with AI risks, building a better democracy and stuff like this. If anyone wants to check that out, torchbearer.community.
Yeah, we will leave the links below so they can check it out. Yeah,
it's a bit higher commitment. It's for people who really want to do a bit more. And if you only have 5 minutes, you want to do something, but you don't have a lot of time, we have something for that too. It's called microcommit. Microcommit.io. You can go there right now, you sign up, and then every week we send you just a couple of easy things you can do in under 5 minutes to make a difference. You send an email or read something or give us a bit of feedback, just very simple things. So we really want to have this engagement for every level of engagement, kind of like a curve, You have 5 minutes, no worries, we've got something for you. You want to put in, a couple hours, here's how you can make a difference. You want to work on it full time, apply to ControlAI, So this is what I would like a healthy civic ecosystem to look like. And we're trying to build it, at least in AI. I would definitely wish in the future to also build beyond AI for other issues as well. But this is, of course, the one we focus on right now.
Connor, how much time do we have until it's too late?
I don't know. I don't think we will know when it happens. I personally operate under the assumption that it's in the next couple of years. It's not guaranteed. Like maybe 30, maybe 50% in the next 2 years, I would say, which is already really bad. It could be 2030, could be after that. But I would be surprised. I would be very surprised if it's more than 10 years. And if so, you can throw pie in my face. I will go out and take it. I'd be happy, that's good. But what I expect is that we will reach a point of no return even before we hit AGI. I think we're already very close to that. And what I mean by that is at a point where AI is, as you say, so integrated into our economy. Mm-hmm. The companies have so much power. Lobbying is so powerful. They're just like, there's nothing we can do. It's just too chaotic. The government is too disempowered. There's too much money. There's too much lobbying. The open source is too distributed. And there's just, even though AGI doesn't exist now, it is impossible to prevent it from coming into existence. I think we are close to this. I think we are at most 1 or 2 years away from this. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I've been wrong many times in the past. I hope I'm wrong again. That's my feeling.
You may be right.
Sadly.
Yeah, I think recently, because of the podcast, obviously when we know that you're coming, we do some research and we investigate about the topic. Like recently as well, we had Roman Yampolsky, which has a vision like similar to yours. And we had other people talking about the AI risks. And that made me, I always been very critical, but I always been more focused on more tangible risks like employment, like deepfakes and all of that. But you guys, talking to you and at the same time preparing for this podcast made me get deeper on that. Well, maybe it's true that the existential risk is more urgent even than the labor market risk. But the thing is that it's so simple and obvious. It's so clear that it's ridiculous that we're not doing anything about it. And I think this is like my key point about this. The problem is that I see everything ends up on the point where it's about getting governments to agree about doing something. And I find that extremely difficult. I think I find this more difficult than developing AGI. So basically for me, I'm very pessimistic about it. And I'm pissed off with myself for being, but at the same time, I have this feeling that even if I'm really pessimistic about it, we cannot not try. we have to do something about it. So I'm not going to get tired of talking about the risk of AI in our way that we can reach. And luckily, because of the reach we're having, we started to talk to the Spanish government and these things. So I'm not going to stop. And every single conference, and last year I did more than 200, I talk about the risks of AI. And I think it's time for starting to put into more people's view the reality that this could happen. And that it's not a matter of like, I think Tristan Harris said that. They said like, if you were going to onto a plane and the pilot told you there is a 10% that the plane will explode, would you just go in the plane? You would not. So this is exactly the same. Like you guys that build AI, you that were on the creation of the things that we use nowadays in our work, you're telling us like, hey, be careful, this can get out of hand. And we're still being like, yeah, whatever, and keep on going. And I think that's something that the problem is that people is not even stopping to think. And I'm just asking people after watching this podcast to reflect on this and then make a decision what you want to do. If you still think that that's bullshit, no, okay, fine. Like, we will see it. But if you think there is a chance that this could get out of hand, just vote for someone that gives a shit about it, because that's all it comes down. And I'm really pissed off that in Spain, in the last like regional elections and all the elections that we had very recently in the last couple of years, no single politician had anything about AI in their program. So I think we just have to start electing people that is aware that there is a situation that has to be fucking handled. And then from there, maybe we get to a better point. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. It's been amazing. Like for me, it's been a personal absolute win because as I said, when I started in AI, you were one of the first sources of information for me. So for me, it was kind of a personal thing to bring you over to the podcast. And I appreciate that you traveled to Barcelona for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It really was a pleasure.